Avoidance motivation. Just what is that? It's where the fear of staying stuck outweighs the excitement of moving forward. It's an aversion-driven push rather than an aspiration-driven pull. Today's topic is surrounding this avoidance motivation. Just exactly why it's important. It's interesting that most motivational content out there focuses on chasing desires, things like success or purpose. But it's also interesting that real transformation often requires a wake-up call. So this episode explores that dynamic. I love the quote by Hazrat Khan. He says, "Fear is nature's whip." You can think of a whip, of what it does to an animal, kicks him in gear. And in a similar sense, that is what fear does for humans. This episode is dedicated to you, so that you can change without having to go through fear as nature's whip, without having to have a wake-up call. You can control your own destiny, act without being forced to act. There are two types of motivation. One is approach and one is avoidance. Approach motivation motivates us toward positive outcomes, while avoidance pushes us away from threats or pain. There is a negativity bias in our brains that psychologists have found that losses or risks, all things that are avoidance triggers, tend to carry more psychological weight than the equivalent gains. That is the push versus the pull. There are famous rodent studies done in psychology and neuroscience that have taken a look into this. They call it the fear versus food drive. In these studies, they calculated the risk of predator versus the reward of food. Would a rat become more motivated to get away from the predator, or would the rat become more motivated to go toward the food? That was what they were testing. And the key takeaway that these studies found that's also applicable to humans' behavior and how their brain works is that rats run away faster from the predator than they do toward their food. Fear energizes them more than desire. I used to think approaches like those of David Goggins were somewhat extreme. And although they still may be, I think there is a lot of validity to the avoidance-based motivation. Here's a clip of him speaking so that we can hear it from the source.
People have been bullied. Some people are just stressed out. Some people are insecure. Some people are fat and overweight. I call myself fat because I was fat. And people don't want to do that. They want to say, oh, don't call yourself fat. Don't call yourself dumb. If you're not real and raw with who the f*** you are, nothing's going to change. And in this nice new world that we live in, we want to hear, you're just a little big. No, man, you might be fat.
I love when he says, in this world, we just want to listen to what we want to hear. But the truth is, we might be fat. We might have a problem we need to face. There are all aspects of us that are imperfect, aspects of us that we need to work on. And it's easy and common for us to hope for better, to hope for more, to hope for change and progress. But we need to understand what gets us there. And unfortunately, from these studies, we learn that that is not always the approach and desire method. That looking toward our future, our aspirations, doesn't give us the same wake-up call that fear of our current circumstance does. There's a real danger here. It's been said by a lot of people, and it's true. Change happens usually when the pain of staying the same becomes greater than the pain of change. But what does that require? That requires a wake-up call when our circumstances get so bad that we're forced to move. Things like a divorce, a mental health crisis, a physical disability or disorder. All of these things force people to wake up. They force people to make a change in their life. But the question is, why didn't they do it before? Why did they start eating healthy before they got diabetes? It's the question we all have to personally answer for ourselves. And it's not an answer we need to feel bad about. It's not an answer we need to beat ourselves up on, but we need to acknowledge the truth. The truth is, if we continue on our current trajectory of life, if we behave the same we do today, tomorrow and the rest of our days, someday we hit a wall. We'd stop making progress. And so in order to avoid that wall, In order to avoid that fear and that wake-up call, we need to take matters into our own hands. We need to be real and honest about who we are, what we're doing, and why we need to change. The push motivation is driven by discomfort. It's driven by fear of failure or decline. These triggers are often sharper and they create faster action. The pull approach is driven by hope, ambition, and vision. It's more pleasant, but it's less urgent. It's what I've been struggling in my life. It's so easy to be pacified by comfort. But when life circumstances don't teach us the lessons we need to learn, it's a moral personal responsibility to bring it upon ourselves to learn the same lessons. Daniel Kahneman found in his research that people push harder to avoid loss than to gain an equivalent award. So take a moment to check your narrative. Are you coasting on hopes, or are you realistically facing the threats? It's hard to see the threats when they're not right in our face, but that doesn't make them any more real. Suspense is what pacifies us into a false security. Consequences don't come all at once. They take time. And by that suspended consequence, we may feel safe, but they will come at some point in our lives. Now, I'm not saying all of this to put away the approach-based motivation. We should hope and aspire for the greener grass in our life, but the science says that that is not enough, that fear is the bigger motivator. And so we need to be aware of that, aware of our human tendency, and act accordingly. David Goggins finishes with this.
We surround ourselves around people that make us feel great. They tell us what we want to hear. The second we put ourselves amongst the uncommon people, we don't like that feeling. That challenging feeling of that person who's waking up at 3:30 in the morning and saying, hey, put your shit on, we're going for a run. We like that person who says, hey, you know what, man, I don't feel good today, man. And they say, oh, it's okay, brother. We don't want that motherfuckers like this. Hey, man, no, bro, get your shit on, man. Stop being a punk.
The truth is, I've appreciated the people in my life that have told me to stop being a punk. I've rarely faced circumstances in my life that have forced me to change. It's been super hard because that's pacified me into a false comfort. And so I'm trying to take the liberty in my own hands to face the inevitable consequences now, to change, to aspire for the greener grass, while acknowledging the lessons that can be learned in the icy cold winter, the fear of what I want to avoid personally. And I want to do the same for you. I want to be your encouraging friend that puts more weight on your potential than your comfort, knowing that that will inevitably bring you more joy. So subscribe for more content like this, surrounded on self-development and self-growth. Do a life trajectory scan. Chart your current path. Ask, where do my current daily habits lead? What happens if I keep doing life the same way? And then compare it to your ideal destination. There will obviously be a gap. The science says that while aspiring to fill that gap through hope, we need to be aware and feel the fear of what would happen if we stay where we are. Write clear, specific consequences that will happen in your life if you don't change. My thought is to combine the two. Combine both fear and hope in your life. We have times and seasons for both. But rather than having to live in hope, oblivious of the fear, and having to feel the fear 100% when life knocks us on our back, enjoy them both at the same time, for what purpose they serve in our life. Reflect on what in your life you're actively fleeing. What comfortable illusions are blocking your push, and how can you map your path utilizing both fear and hope to propel you toward your desires. I'm Dan with the Perspective Project, and there are some points in our life when we feel the perspective of fear, when life knocks us on our back, that fear becomes our motivator for every behavior and action we take. Although I know that fear is necessary, I have never enjoyed how I felt in those circumstances. I know that tough things will happen in all of our lives, but I want to be able to personally avoid any unnecessary suffering that I put upon myself. And I want the same for you. So as you move along your path toward change and self-improvement, Let the power of fear come with you, being aware of the results in your life you want to avoid, while continually aspiring to the life you want to become.